What is going on, everybody? John Stanek here from Johnny Radio, along with my friend Nathaniel Ahart, and we are starting to count down the top 60 albums of the 1960s. Welcome to the show.
Yes, guys. Thank you for voting on these lists too. I think as you see from our list, there may be a few contentious points in this series, but I think overall you guys did a really bang up job. I can't really argue many of these albums. They're some of the best of all time, even. So I'm just excited to get into them with my good friend John here. This has been a long time coming, and yeah, I'm just so excited to talk about the '60s, man.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast, dude. And yeah, as Nathaniel said, you guys voted. So over 40 people submitted lists. Over 400 albums ended up making the whole spreadsheet. So yeah, condensing it down to the top 60 was a little difficult, actually. Once, there were a couple tiebreakers and things like that, but we got it all worked out. And are you ready to get into it?
Let's do it, man.
All right. So at number 60, The Stooges, 1969's debut album, Punk Rock, baby.
Yeah, no, this album is really, really good. It wasn't on my list, but I certainly understand the appeal of this record. I mean, it really was a cornerstone in proto punk. And of course, you got John Cale, producer on here, from the Velvet Underground, and he had a little bit of a contentious relationship with the Iggy and the Stooges there, from my understanding. But really, I mean, there's so much, just stripping it down back to the basis and just making it sound really, really hard. And it was, obviously it took a lot of influence from the Velvet Underground and early rock and roll, for that matter. And you got classics on here like I Want to Be Your Dog, with like the bells in the back. It was just, John Cale was playing that, and just such a great song. And obviously you also, Ron Ashton, I think is just one of the best and most underrated guitar players of his era. I mean, he was playing psychedelic stuff, just as well, not quite as good as Hendrix, but I certainly think his work was quite exceptional.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I Want to Be Your Dog. That's one of my favorite songs of the punk rock genre. And even though I really enjoy Iggy's solo stuff after the Stooges, like Lust for Life in the 70s, this was a great start. And, as you said, kind of taking some cues from the underground, not just in sound, but in style as well. Like that song in particular reminds me a little bit of like I'm Waiting for the Man from VU and Nico, but yeah, this wasn't on my list either, but it made a lot of people's lists, so I'm glad that it's going to make some people happy.
Right. And it has some other really great cuts on it too, like No Fun. Is I guess it actually is fun listening to that song, really, yeah. And especially the guitar work from Ron there is just absolutely exceptional. And also Not Right, which I sadly can relate to pretty well. But that's a great song within itself. And also, I just have to mention the 10-minute We Will Fail, where they're saying the Jai Street, where it's just really slow and droning. That, yet again, I mean, it isn't the worst song I've ever heard. It's not a bad song, but it's not my favorite or anything.
It wouldn't make our top 5 of songs over 10 minutes long.
Right. No, not at all. But yeah. I do think it's an interesting footnote on this album, because you do get quite a, they're obviously, it was very, very, it was very much of the psychedelic era, but, very much a step forward towards something else entirely. And I think when it comes to punk and proto-punk, I think this is one of my favorites. Not that I love it, but I think it is one of the better records from that genre. So yeah, I completely understand it being on this list, and I think it's at a decent spot at number 60 here.
Yeah, absolutely, great start. All right, so now at number 59.
The Black Saint and the Sinner Lady by Charles Mingus. Yeah, this is, I mean, it's Mingus. For better or for worse, you love him or you don't really. But I love Mingus, and I think that this is not my favorite Mingus album. But it certainly is very, very ambitious because the way it's constructed, it's like a ballet, and it's like kind of like these movements that are just kind of flow into each other. And I really think that especially the tracks like Duet Solo Dancers is really, really phenomenal. But the way that you kind of see this internalized pain that make it's really a painful album to listen to. And
Right.
I think, you know, it has to be said. I mean, the musicianship on this is absolutely incredible. And Mingus, I think, was one of the most gifted composers in jazz. And you hear that here. But I don't think like, especially when you're talking about jazz, this is like far from the most accessible album. But I completely understand like why people love it so much. I mean, really though, it has some of the most wild soundscapes I've ever heard in jazz, but it
Yeah.
really isn't one. It's one I respect more than I fully love, but I do think it is a really good album, and I think it's a really good choice. What say you, John?
Yeah, well, I listened to it for the first time today, actually, just to make sure that I had at least heard the albums we're going to discuss. And had already decided I'm probably not that much of a
Oh,
Mingus guy,
oh man.
even though I am getting into jazz and I love certain artists like Coltrane, of course, and Miles Davis and stuff that's, let's say, a little less avant-garde, maybe. But that being said, you can totally see why even artists like Radiohead cite Mingus as a huge influence. Like, uh,
National anthem, right?
yeah, like
Yeah.
I had, could hear some of that when listening to it today, and also I felt like it had like this weird, almost like a film noir soundtrack kind of vibe to
Yeah.
it, which that element of it I found really interesting, but it doesn't feel like something I would listen to on a regular basis. It's just like, you know, it is a piece of art and I see why people love it, but it was not on my list, obviously.
Right. And you might not feel this way, but I think that Mingus I mean, obviously if you've seen my video for the
Mhm.
top 10 albums of the 1950s, at least my personal list, that was my favorite album from the 50s. I think it's way more accessible than this. And but yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's really he was so innovative. I honestly I think he's better than Miles Davis. Sorry to break your heart there, but
No, that's
I
cool,
just
man.
think that I just think he had, and also Blues and Roots was another 60s album that I love from Mingus. That
Mhm.
I guess I'll just say it's not on here. But I completely understand that this one people kind of have this taking to. So yeah, I'm not going to argue that being on my list.
Blues and Roots will be a better entry point for me, since, as you know, I love
Yeah,
blues. I don't know how exact that is, that it has a blues root to it, but yeah, I'm sure I'll eventually get into him at some point. Just finding the right way in. So,
right. Yeah, it's more kind of like New Orleans jazz sort of.
mhm,
That's what it kind of sounds like to me.
yeah.
But yeah, maybe you'll enjoy that one. I definitely think you should check it out. But
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I did have an awesome time in New Orleans just listening to like the local jazz artists, so it's very possible. But all
Awesome.
right, cool. Well, next on the list at number 58, Bookends by Simon and Garfunkel.
Yes.
S&G makes the list, baby. Yeah, great album. I mean, just for the song America alone, which is one of their absolute classics, just a brilliant song. And of course, you got also, from the Graduate soundtrack, also, you have Mrs. Robinson. And then you've also got Hazy Shade of Winter, another really cool gem. At the Zoo, of course, the title track. Yeah, man. As you just mentioned to me off camera, less than 30 minutes long, but very memorable for what it is. One
Man,
of their best.
it really is. And it leaves such an impact too. And I think the thing that's so cool about it is how the first half is a concept album about life and aging and growing up. And you start off with, you know, obviously the bookends themes, which is just absolutely phenomenal, but also Save the Life of My Child, which is really good. I would have
Mhm.
loved that track if I hadn't heard like The Sound of Silence on the past four Simon and Garfunkel albums.
Right.
It was like sampled in there. Like, I don't care. But America, I mean, is one of their best songs, and it just really so beautiful, just traveling cross country on this bus and with Kathy,
Yeah.
and I mean, there's so many great
You can
lines, and
picture
just
the story. Like it's right
yeah.
up there with The Boxer as like one of their greatest, just, you can just see the imagery as he's singing it.
Oh,
So
absolutely, man. And that's the thing. Obviously, you all know Paul Simon is one of the greatest songwriters of all time. I mean, there's no ifs, and or buts about it. And yeah, some songs on here get a little pretentious, like Punky's Dilemma. Like if I was a uh, Kellogg's cornflake, like what the hell? That's stupid.
right.
But I mean, and obviously he got better as a songwriter later on. But I mean, his the musicality of his songs, the storytelling, especially on America, is so vivid and has some of the most beautiful, poignant lines, and just you just see them traveling on this bus to somewhere better, and also how it goes into others, kind of like um showing how this relationship progresses. Not a fan of voices of old people. It's just a
Mhm.
sound collage of people in a nursing home. Like it's really, really weird. And but Art Garfunkel got a writing credit for that, so that was interesting.
Hmm.
But Old Friends is just absolutely gorgeous, and then obviously bookending it with the bookends theme is really a great way to close the side A. And it's so crazy to think that this album was like made up while Paul Simon was having writer's block, because I don't think it's their absolute best album. But yet again, I mean, I love it. I even think it should be a little higher on this list, but that's fine. I think it's at a good spot.
Yeah.
But yeah, the second side, you have stuff that was rejected from the Graduate soundtrack. I believe Faking It was rejected from that soundtrack.
Mhm.
But yeah, and Hazy Shade of Winter is another one that I think is really great, which is about his writing block at this time. But
Yeah.
I think far and away, as much as I love America, I think the best song on here, the most enduring, is Mrs. Robinson. Everyone knows, and here's to you, Mrs. Robinson. Especially if
Yeah.
you know The Graduate, which is one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Maybe I have to do a video on that sometime.
Yeah.
But I
Please do.
absolutely, yeah, man, I absolutely love this song. It's an absolute classic. It has so many great lines on here too. Just it
Where
just
have you gone, Joe DiMaggio?
Maggio.
Yeah.
It's yeah,
And
it's just
one of my favorites is put it in the pantry with your cupcake.
that's the one I was going to mention. Yeah, I absolutely
The
love
way
it.
he says cupcakes is hilarious.
Cupcakes. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like so quaint. Yeah. And that yet again, just
Yeah.
Paul Simon's voice is yet again as much as of a slightly better singer Art Garfunkel is. I just think Paul Simon has an iconic voice on
Oh
his
yeah.
own accords. But yeah, this is an absolute classic. I wish I saw it higher, but it's great to have it on this list. I absolutely love this album.
Oh yeah. Great pick, guys. So now at number 57.
Yeah, said it's alright.
Forever Changes by Love. Yeah, this is an album that I know a lot of people love. I think it's good. I think it's quite overrated though. And I don't think, obviously, people hold this as a landmark of psychedelic rock, and I don't really get it to that extent. Obviously it has great songs in there, like the opening track Alone Again, or which has like this very Latin mariachi sound to it, which is absolutely phenomenal. And also And More Again, which is a very plaintive ballad from Arthur Lee, and him kind of like singing very earnestly, almost crooning like about this girl. But it could also be insinuated that it was like maybe drug use. I don't know. Obviously this was written at a time of such activities. Um,
Yes,
but
indeed.
but there's a lot of really great songs on here, like maybe The People Would Be the Times, or Between Clark and Hilldale. I had to read that out if you noticed, but I
Yeah.
love that song. That again, yeah, has that Latin flavor to it. But I love how like he'll end off each verse, he'll suspend the last word that he was going to say, and then that word will be the first word of the next verse. I think that's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah,
That's probably
that
my favorite
actually is
song.
my favorite song on the album. Um,
Yeah, it's a
Not
really
that
great track.
to me, like, I don't know, this record, I think also it's overrated. To me, it's just kind of mediocre. Although I think it's cool what they were doing, like incorporating some of that mariachi style music. Like, I think what does it for me, like his voice just doesn't do it for me.
Yeah, I and and I really liked it, like their debut album. I actually like a lot more than this. It was very that was like proto Velvet Underground, which is kind of
Right.
crazy to think about. But really, that one, it just had, you know, it was more garage rock, and here they took it more. I like Arthur Lee's more hard edge singing. Where
Hmm.
here, he's not the strongest vocalist, but you know I also don't think the melodies to all of them. Obviously, the one we mentioned with the long title, which I don't want to repeat again, very very catchy.
Hmm.
But I think that it goes on for a little bit too long. Like it's 43 minutes. It feels like more like 50. And
Yeah.
I also think also Bummer in the Summer is a great song that I really really enjoy too. Um, but yeah, I've always you know, and I just listened to this like a week ago, but I really don't get the appeal of it over some other psychedelic albums from the era, which I'm sure we will get into on this list, and that I think are ranked lower on the traditional publications below this one.
Hmm.
But I'm glad that this is lower. I certainly don't think it should be above Bookends or anything. But you know,
Right.
obviously a lot of you love it, so you know, who am I to say? What are we to say, John? You
Yeah,
know?
exactly. This is democracy. So yeah, what are you gonna do? So all right. Well, now at number 56, Santana, the debut album by Santana. Man, such a cool record. I definitely had this on my list, and I think it's actually in a pretty good spot, honestly. I think that they grew to get even better on their next couple albums, but this was an awesome start. I mean, Evil Ways, Jingo, Soul Sacrifice, that's the one that really does it for me. The closing track that's over 6 minutes long, but it's like every second of it, especially if you see the performance at Woodstock of them playing it live, it's just so intense. And yeah, I love how it has like several false endings, like but then they keep it going, and it's just so fun. The drummer is so amazing too. I forget his name, but just the band overall, Carlos Santana, of course, the bright shining light, but everybody is just magnificent.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'll say this. I didn't put this on the list, and I wouldn't put it on the list just in general, but I get a lot of people. I really like it. I certainly think it deserves to be on here more than Forever Changes, if I'm being
Yes.
completely honest. Um, but yeah, this is a really solid debut album. It isn't the most crazy album I've ever heard, and I'm sure that they go even crazier in the 70s. But really, this was one of the founding like Chicano rock albums, and I don't think it gets really any better than Evil Ways. I mean, when I heard that song, I was like, oh, I know this song. What a classic song! You
Yeah.
got to hide your evil
Evil
ways,
ways.
baby. I mean, how can you not love this song? It's absolute classic. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's. I really like a lot of these songs. A lot of them I just don't love. Treat I think is a fantastic instrumental. That
Mhm.
one is probably my other favorite song off of here. But yeah, I mean, obviously Carlos Santana is one of the best guitar players ever. I'm sure he even gets better on Abraxas and so forth. But I absolutely love the playing here. Michael Shreve is the drummer. I thought I should mention him.
Right.
He does some great work on here, but I really love Greg Rowley's voice. He really, his vocals do suit this band quite well. And I mean, can you imagine this band without him or Carlos Santana? I mean, it just doesn't seem like it would
Exactly.
work. But yeah, not my favorite album. You know, and there's some stuff that, you know, it made it on the list over some other things, but I won't argue it too much. I do think it's a really solid debut album, and
Yeah.
honestly, I can't wait for to hear Abraxas, because that's coming up for me soon. So I'm very
You're gonna
excited to get
dig
into
that
some
one,
more stuff.
man. I think if you enjoyed this to that degree, I think you'll like it that much more. But also really cool cover art on this
Yeah,
album. The lion, black and white, it just stands out. Really cool, man. I love
I
it.
absolutely love that album cover, man, for
Yeah.
sure.
Cool. All right. Well, now at number 55, Wheels of Fire by Cream, the 1968 double album. Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce, Ginger Baker, a super group who, in my opinion, this is actually their best record. A lot of people would say Disraeli Gears was, but man, just for White Room and Crossroads alone, those two, just two of their most amazing songs. One being on one record, the other being on the live record. But there's also some great stuff on here. Their cover of Born Under a Bad Sign, Sitting on Top of the World. There's some stuff on here that, you know, the drum solo that goes on too long, and things like that. But it has so much of their best work that this was higher on my list. So I know not on yours, right?
Okay, can I say something?
Yeah.
This might piss a lot of people off. I think Cream is super overrated. Not the players themselves. Okay, obviously those three guys, some of the best to ever do it. I just, you know, this out. Honestly, I don't want to spoil the rest of the list, but I think this is the worst album on the list. It's not bad.
Wow.
I don't dislike it. I think it's okay. Obviously, White Room is an absolute classic. That might even be my favorite Cream song. Is just absolutely incredible. And obviously, Crossroads is pretty great in its own way. And also I listened to this only one time, so cut me a little bit of slack. But I was just really bored by it, and I just think that Cream was one of those bands where they were so great as players, but they only had a few really great songs. I don't find Disraeli Gears I really do like, but I just think this is a very overlong record. Yeah, and yeah, the Ginger Baker drum solo is impressive, but why do I want to listen to him drum for 23 minutes?
Right.
I like when I heard that, I just started playing my video game. I was like, all right. And I usually don't do that, but I was just like, nah, I know
hear
a lot
you.
of people love it. I know, yeah, I know people
I was introduced to Cream like with their greatest hits album. So it was like every song on there, of course, was a classic. So maybe that has something to do with like the fact that I love them right out of the gate for all their hits. But you're right. I mean, their albums as a whole are very uneven usually. This having its moments as well, but I think even Disraeli Gears has some moments that are like, what?
yeah.
But you know, so they don't have a perfect record, unfortunately. I wish they did. I guess seek out their greatest hits if
Or
you're
just
not
listen
into this.
to or just listen to Layla or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just, you know, I don't think this. I know you had it on there. I don't think this should be on the list. Sorry.
Well,
I really I don't get it. But
we'll
you know,
agree to
White Room's
disagree
great.
on that one. White Room
Yeah.
and Crossroads alone are worth it for me. But
White Room is amazing.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that song. I mean, just kind of like that guitar
one of the
tone is
best
nuts.
wah guitar solos ever. And
Maybe the best. I don't know.
yeah.
It's up there.
Definitely. Yeah. All right. Well, cool. Little disagreement there, but that's cool. So now at number 54.
Face to Face by the Kinks. Yes, this album is great. And really this is the album that made me really be like, oh wow, I got to get into the Kinks. And now the Kinks are one of my all-time favorite bands. I have them up there with the Beatles and the Who. I think that they're one of the greatest bands of all time. I think one of the most overlooked bands of all time.
Yeah.
And I think that this album especially was such a turning point, because before this, they were kind of an inferior version of the Rolling Stones. And I think that they had, obviously, You Really Got Me, Well-Respected Man, you know, All Day and All Night. You know, there's some great songs here and there, but it wasn't really, you know, it was kind of few and far between. It wasn't like there were standouts, but it wasn't like an amazing cohesive vision that Ray Davies would later harness together. And I think that this is where he really started doing it, because this is a concept album kind of about like these observations of people in society. And I think that this is where you really see Ray Davies starting to emerge as one of the most dominant, one of the most witty, one of the most hilarious, one of the most introspective songwriters ever. I mean, he is like one of the best songwriters ever of all time. I put him right up there with the best of them. But you know, yeah, just starting this record off with Party Line, which is, you know, the vocals on here are kind of rough and the mixing isn't that great, so it's probably my biggest issue with it. But great song from Dave Davies. And then Rosie, Won't You Please Come Home, really good song, but really one of Ray's most anxiety ridden songs, especially talking about his sister moving away, and kind of like him dealing with that personally. Dandy is great, and I just, man, I absolutely love the lyrics on here where it, it's just so incredible, the wordplay on here, and I wish I had the lyrics up because maybe I'll pull them up a little bit. I'm kind of fumbling, but I just got to say, Too Much on My Mind is just such a beautiful song. That bass line from Pete Quaife is just incredible. And then you hear the harpsichord started playing over it. Like it really, you started to hear that quirky sound that Kinks were known for, but really one of the most beautiful songs about anxiety just ever. And then, I mean, who writes a song about a session musician? Like only Ray Davies would think to do that. You have that on here. House in the Country is great song too. You know, talking about this guy who's kind of like very entitled and almost kind of a sociopath, stumbles. His daddy fell down the stairs and now he has all his money. This is a great line. But just and just that boom boom, house in the country with a big sports car. I mean, it's just an absolutely classic Kinks song. Holiday in Waikiki is one of the funniest songs about commercialism I've ever heard, and just kind of mocking the idea of travel and kind of like how it's conglomerized.
He's one of the best sarcastic songwriters ever, man. I mean, and the standout for me is Sunny Afternoon, man. I love that song so much. The tax man's taking all my dough. The way he enunciates these words, man, are just ridiculous. And that chorus, the save me from this greed. I got a big fat mama.
To break me. No, it's so great. And just like what he's talking about in the song too, like just the hints of domestic abuse, you know, like we're talking about my wife ran off with my car, you know, telling tales of drunkenness
and cruelty.
It's like, oh my goodness, it just sticks with you. And I'm crazy not to love the song the first time I heard it, but over time, I mean, this is my favorite song on this album, and I think one of the best songs Ray Davies wrote. And of course, you know, also I have like I'll Remember, which sounds like If I Needed Someone off of Rubber Soul. But it's a great song in its own right. It stands on its own. It's so catchy. In Little Miss Queen of Darkness is another character portrait of, you know, this kind of girl going to bars, trying to like, I guess maybe trying to do the hookup scene, but you can see in her eyes how sad she is and how lonely. And it's like, man, it's some really
I mean, just stuff. Like Paul Simon, man, you can picture these stories come to life, and it's amazing. Yeah, one of the best.
So and in a really much more sarcastic way too.
Yeah, indeed. But great choice, guys. So now at number 53,
Nights in White Satin,
Days of Future Past by the Moody Blues. Man, what an amazing concept album. One of the first of its kind. I believe it came out in 1967. Incredible. Nights in White Satin alone is just one of the greatest songs of all time. I mean, just a beautiful melody, that midsection, just the chord changes alone on it are just amazing. And then the build up at the end is so cool. But then you've also got Tuesday Afternoon, another one of their classics. And the way that they just weave this kind of a day in the life of a person, you know, start with morning and get to night. It seems so simple, but the way it's done is just perfectly, crafted. I think it's great.
Yeah, you know, this is the one album I hadn't heard before we did this list, and I was like, okay, well, I gotta listen. I listened to their debut album as a kind of throwaway R&B thing. Not that it was bad, but this was one of the biggest 180s for any band from one album to the next. But you know, I'll tell you, I mean, my 60s list, my top 10 of the 60s list aged like milk. Because look, I mean, if you guys know my rating system by now, I'm not one to give out very, very high ratings, especially 10s. This is a 10 out of 10 record for me.
Wow,
I think
that's awesome.
this is one of the greatest albums. I even like this better than Pet Sounds.
What?
So
this would be like you're in your top 5, maybe.
This would be number 2.
Wow.
This album absolutely astounded. It blew my mind. I've never heard anything like this in my entire life, especially when you open up with that beautiful intro. The day begins and you're introduced to this lush orchestration. I was like, wait a second, is this Tchaikovsky? Like, I was like, this is unbelievable.
And the stuff they pull off with a mellotron on this album is like incredible, man. Probably one of the first to really use it prominently. And just incredible.
Yeah, man. And I was just, and obviously just having an overture too, is like, what rock album did that? And in the way they tell the story, I mean, the concept's simple, where they're talking about going through the day and just kind of like looking especially in my favorite song, Morning, Another Morning, with the amazing flute solo. And it's just amazing. And just how they're looking, these adults are looking at these children and kind of like, I guess, basking in like, wow, I wish I could go back to that innocence where time didn't pass at all. And then of course that goes in a lunch break, peak hour, which is just kind of like, has a really like hard driving beat, and just talking about how like people are trying to bustle home, but they aren't really, like, I've still got time, we don't have to rush. And this guy's kind of meditating in his house. But really just the way these soundscapes come together, like I've never heard like symphonic music and rock converge in such a seamless way. And then of course the Afternoon, Forever Afternoon, and which is just one of their catchiest songs, and then Everything Evening Time to Get Away, where it's kind of like talking about like, your job is running you down, but it's, and it's like, but it's okay, it's not, it doesn't hurt you. It's like, wow, man. And just the way
you can really see how this was a precursor to albums like Tommy, Dark Side of the Moon. I mean, you name it. And they were one of the first, along with the Beatles, to have a concept record. But yeah, just Nights in White Satin alone for me, man, like the poetry of the lyrics, Nights in White Satin, never reaching the end, the letters I've written, never meaning to send, beauty I've always missed, these eyes before, just what the truth is, I can't say anymore. And then that big chorus, because I love you, it's glorious, man.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad you love it.
Dude, this is one of the greatest albums ever made. Like,
how is it this low?
Well, and I was just about to say that, John, because I think the only reason why, because obviously the reason it would be much higher on this list technically, but I think it's because not enough people have heard it. Because who would have thought, like, I never would have thought I'd put this above Pet Sounds.
Right.
But and just the way like that, like the vocals where they kind of have like the talking segment where you're kind of like, getting set into like, the dark sphere in the sky or whatever he says, and it just talking about all the things that are happening in the universe and how the record ties together so beautifully. This is a masterpiece. This is a perfect album. I don't have any criticisms. Every song is great. And I really think that this is such a because I'm not a huge fan of prog. Obviously I love Pink Floyd, but there's something that there's like an inherent pretentiousness to a lot of this stuff, but this to me, it just, wow, like when prog really hits, it really hits for me. This really paved the way, as you said, for like Dark Side of the Moon, which is, even better, which is not saying much because they're both like perfect, but this is one of the greatest albums of all time. So if you guys have not listened to this, man,
if you get one thing out of this episode, listen to Days of Future Past.
Should be higher. It should be in the top 10, but I understand that not enough people heard it. Maybe at least top 20, I would say. But I regret not listening to it before. I'll say that.
Well, I'm glad you did, man. So now at number 52.
I was born
Ain't That Good News by Sam Cooke. Yes, so glad this one made it. I love this album. And the last album, unfortunately, during his lifetime, as he was murdered tragically later that year, I believe. And just wow, I mean, what a way to go out, because I hadn't really heard any of his studio albums. Just you know, the Portrait of a Legend before this, and you know, the greatest hits.
Same here. Yeah.
Right, but once you hear this, I mean, especially starting off with "Ain't That Good News," which is the title track, Sam
Such a
Cooke
fun
classic.
song. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just you the way he combines gospel with something, I guess, very secular, where he's like talking about, like, you know, how it's like, you know, that disconnect the telephone, you know what's going on in that situation, and just the way he combines these two things. And of course that soaring, I mean, one of the greatest vocalists in history, no question about that.
Yeah.
And especially on Meet Me at Mary's Place, you know, just say, we're gonna hell, you know,
Yeah.
and the way he like hits that high, it's like, ah, you know, he
Yeah.
gets all the way up there, and obviously he didn't do it better than I can. I mean, it's Sam Cooke we're talking about. So great, but just the whole first side, I think, is just like perfect.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
Good Times is yet again another just one of his all-time classics with the xylophone playing. Let get in the groove and let the good time roll.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's just
That's
how
just
can you not
feel
love
good,
that
happy
song?
music, man. I love it.
Yeah, man.
And even, you know, oh, that's right. A Change Is Gonna Come isn't until side B, but
Oh,
man, one of the greatest songs, you know, and that's one that I had heard before, but not really heard it, if you know what I mean, until
yeah.
like years later, I heard it again, and I was like, because you see it on so many lists of the greatest songs of all time, and I was like, really? But then, yeah, man, like just the way he performs that track and the meaning behind it, it's just it's incredible, man. Just for that song alone, that's what got me to really listen to the full album. But the whole thing is like, there's not a weak track on here, honestly.
Well,
Um,
I may disagree with you a little bit there.
yeah.
But even so, I just want to mention, like, Another Saturday Night is another classic Sam Cooke song, though maybe some of the lyrics haven't aged as well. It's still so much fun, you know. Another Saturday night and I ain't got
Yeah.
nobody.
Yeah.
It's just so catchy. And obviously Tennessee Waltz is another great like his take on a country song and really making it his own with yet again those soaring vocals. I mean, just incredible. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, come on. I mean, the change is going to come is really the centerpiece, and I agree with you, John. This song took a while to grow on me, because I was like, is the orchestration a little too lush? But the more I heard it, I'm like, no, this is perfect. And I love the story where he heard blowing in the wind and was like, hey, a white boy's doing it better than we are, and
Yeah.
but he outdid Dylan on this one. I think, quite frankly, it's just one of the best songs. Is that I was born by
Oh
the
man.
river. I mean, it just when
Yeah.
you hear that, it just sets you in, and really just it's so sad and just unbelievable this song didn't blow up in his lifetime. Because, you know, I mean, it's become, even just in a few years after his death, it became so synonymous with the civil rights movement.
Right.
Just absolutely insane. But I do think that Sitting in the Sun is, I don't like that song. It's well orchestrated, but it's very tonally conflicting. Like, why is there something so peaceful playing? Like, oh, I'm talking about money, you know, like,
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
get that money. I don't get it, but I do.
Yeah.
And I think my biggest thing with this album, it falls off in the second half. Like, there's some great
It
songs, like
does.
Falling
Yeah.
in Love is great. Home, I can just picture someone going through the woods to get to home at night. Really beautiful song.
Right.
But yeah, after that, I don't like, you know, I don't like Sit in the Sun, but not Second Time and Real Song are bad. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, there a change is going to come. I mean, how do you
Yeah,
come back
exactly. How do you top that? So yeah, but you're right. Side A is definitely stronger. You know, which is the case for most albums of that time period, I guess, anyway. But yeah, man, what a strong record, especially for, like, to me, and I think we'll see this throughout this list probably. You know, the 60s really picked up in the second half, like 65 to 69, but this one in 64 was a real standout, I think. Even though, of course, you had some prominent Beatles and Dylan stuff going on at that time, this was a real gem that I hadn't listened to until just this year actually. So I'm so glad I did, and so glad it made the list.
Good
So
spot for it too, I think.
yeah, I think so too. So now at number 51,
Arthur, or The Decline and Fall of the British Empire.
the
By
Kinks
the Kinks.
again. Yeah.
Yeah, in the same episode, unbelievable. But I mean, you can't have enough Kinks on this list, and I'm so glad that they're on here because I think that they have one of the best album runs from Face to Face all the way to Lola. Is just every single album is great, and I think that this is one of their absolute best crowning achievements. This is like top 50 albums of all time for me, so I absolutely adore this record, and I think one of the strongest I think probably the strongest concept album if we're talking about similar themes. Obviously Village Green, it's pretty tied together, but this is more about, this guy Arthur, which was actually the name of his sister. I believe it was the sister we were talking about earlier, her husband, who they emigrated to Australia. And this is kind of like talking about that. And of course, starting off with Victoria is a really, really fun track to
One of
start the
their
record off
catchiest
with.
songs ever, man.
Victoria.
Victoria.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great song. And then of course you have songs like Yes Sir, No Sir, which is kind of like about I guess conformism. And just them talking about like, the British royalty and just them sending off people to die and not, people blindly following the regime and not really thinking about, which, unfortunately we are seeing in another country. But Some Mother's Son is one of the most haunting songs Ray Davies ever has written, and probably the most powerful anti-war song I've ever heard in my entire life. Like storytelling at its finest, its most heartbreaking, it's most beautifully profound. I mean, it is just absolutely incredible. And that's not even my favorite song on here. And also Driving, which is so much fun and just so quirky with it. Dee, 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 like as you'd expect from the Kinks. So much fun. And Brainwashed.
Can I guess your favorite song?
Go ahead.
Shangri-La.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
as many people are, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just such the whole. I don't think that there's a song that describes middle age stagnancy better than this one, and just so many great Ray Davies lines on here, like when it's like gone are the lavatories in your backyard. It's like you graduate, congrats, you have a toilet in your house.
Right.
But just like him talking about like how people will go tell their business in another Shangri-La, but it's just so epic in scope too, especially that section was like Shangri-La, Shangri-La, la 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 la. It's just absolutely incredible, and I think that obviously the centerpiece of this album, and really I think the one that drives the themes home the hardest. But also there's other great songs. Australia is great. Really great guitar work from Dave Davies, who I think is really such an underrated guitarist in his own right. And really very, very active on social media, that guy. His
is he?
Yeah, his Twitter is very funny, and his Instagram. He tweeted something. It's like, if I say I like BB King, does that make me racist? I don't know what context he was talking about, but I wanted to. I don't know. I didn't know how to answer that question, Dave. Sorry.
Interesting.
But Mr. Churchill Says is another one. We're talking about like the air raids and the fourth. That one seems a little off to put on the sound. But I also really love She Bought a Hat Like Princess Marina, which is yet again, I mean, it's juxtaposed with this very vaudevillian sort of sound, but the lyrics are so dark and so disturbing. And also in some ways the production on it reminds me of something off of Pet Sounds, the way like they're like scraping the floor. It's very unorthodox use of music, but yet again there's a lot. And obviously the title track Arthur is really great and a perfect way to close out this album, kind of question the main character himself. And I just think that this is some of the most brilliant songwriting on any album, and I think some of the most quirkiest and some of the most distinct. I mean, Ray Davies is such a songsmith, and just his melodies get stuck in your head, and there's so many on here that it just I can just hum them.
And as you said, I mean, such a good concept album that that sticks to the story, and that's why it's one of the best. And yeah, it's so great to see the Kinks on here already multiple times.
Twice. The first to make
It would have been cool to see them maybe a little higher, more
Yeah.
spaced out, but then at the same time, there's a lot more greatness to come. So but yeah, so glad the Kinks are getting their due, man, because to this day I think so many people don't check out their stuff. They just hear, or maybe they don't even realize they hear their music in so many films and almost every Wes Anderson movie, and
yeah.
or multiple in some of them. But yeah, man, Darjeeling Limited, of course, like has
Right.
so many
Yeah.
great ones.
With strangers and
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah.
no, and I think seeing this makes me glad though that seeing the Kinks on here, because I mean this is certainly I won't spoil it too much. This is not the last time we may see the Kinks on this list, and
Yeah.
it just makes me glad to see that people are really appreciating them as much as I do.
Exactly. Yeah, same here, man. So yeah, so far I think we got a great thing going here, man. All of the picks thus far, to everyone who voted, thank you so much for voting. And some of you, right down to the wire, Nathaniel, you included.
Well, I made sure
But,
it was good here.
Yeah, man. But dude, so many great lists, and it just gets better from here. So tune in next week. We're gonna count down numbers 50 to 41. And yeah, can't wait to do it, man. I'll see you there.
See you guys later.
All right. Peace.
Victoria!